Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Harmony, for being here with us today. We are having Harmony Slater on our latest episode, Profesora Yoga, and we are very excited that you are making room for this podcast, for chatting, having a chat with us and sharing your experience in yoga and in life.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to come see you in person soon in Madrid.
Yeah, it's true. That's going to be late September.
Yeah.
A 5-day program. And actually, Harmony, I can't wait. I can't wait. Because, it's true. Actually, for different reasons, when you practice mostly on your own, or maybe you practice with some people at times, but I mean, the bulk of the practice, you do it on your own. And it's not like you need motivation anymore, but having that little kick, it's always great. And then this is something that I personally am very interested in, just learning from a woman, developing my practice with a woman that understands. We can probably talk about this, but that understands like the female body and all the particularities that come with our female package, which are a few differences are there. A few differences are there, right? And so I'm really excited about it. So thank you so much for making room in your schedule for this.
It'll be really wonderful. I'm excited too. I know I remember holding a regular Mysore program and just being so grateful to host guest teachers and be able to just practice and not feel like, oh, I have to hold the space and teach, and I can just sink into my practice for 5 days. It's like a staycation, a little holiday at home.
No, I totally agree. Completely agree. I'm really excited about this podcast and about all the things that you can actually share with us, because you've done a lot of things. I mean, you've been doing yoga since 95.
Yeah. That was when I was first introduced to it. So it was really interesting because it was introduced totally in a very non-spiritual context. It was introduced, but I was I was very interested in spirituality my whole life. I used to read the Bible every day. I used to just read all kinds of texts on mysticism and spirituality and God. And so I always had this very deep interest in spiritual practices and worship and connection and communion and, divining and, messaging and all the things. But when I was introduced to yoga, it was introduced through my dance career. I was training as a modern dancer at that time, and it was introduced as a nice way to warm up the body and use the breath to warm up the body. And so I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, and I enjoyed it. I felt some interesting benefits, but it wasn't like a yoga practice where we do, the yoga asanas and vinyasas and then lie down and take rest. We would do the practice and then we'd move into more dancing exercises, right? So taking all that energy and then putting it into movement and expression. And so when I left dancing and left that dance world, then I wasn't really moving my body, and I was studying at the University of Calgary. I did a degree in philosophy and religious studies, and near the end of my degrees, I was starting to feel disconnected from myself physically, and I'd had a whole lifetime of movement and wasn't really doing much movement, was just diving into studies, and which I love as well. I love learning. I love knowledge and research and all of that. It really feeds my mind body on a very different level, and also my spirit. I get super inspired by it. But then I wasn't really like doing much for my body, and I was feeling a little bit disconnected. A little more anxiety was coming up in my nervous system. And my mom said, "Oh, why don't you go try doing some yoga or something?" I have no idea where she like came up with this, but maybe I had mentioned it was something I was interested in or I wanted to try. And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So then I went and took my first class. And that was like my first sort of like yoga class, where it was just like a yoga practice and then lie down, take rest. And it was really transformative. It was just like, wow, this is what I needed in my life. And it felt like it brought all of these teachings I was learning in Buddhism and Eastern religions, and I could feel it in my body all of a sudden. And I was like, oh, it's like the missing piece. It's the practice to all of this philosophy that I was learning. And then I just never really looked back.
Yeah. No, but
So,
it's interesting how it works. Sometimes, I mean, you coming from, it's actually a very interesting background coming from, well, dancing, which happens quite a bit in the yoga world
it
and
does,
also in the Ashtanga world. Actually, Harmony, I must confess, I'm a big fan of one of your Karandavasana videos on YouTube. I always try to check it out, and like, because you have like special way of doing Karandavasana, which is not different from mine. So that's why I always keep you close
top
to me.
of mind.
Yeah. And you actually have dancing and dancer feet, is that how you call it? I can see it on your front feet.
Yeah. Like the pointing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like you can see like there's some dancing there, so it makes sense what you're saying. But that actually happens quite a bit. The crossover of dancers coming into Ashtanga.
I think it's like I mean, it's interesting because I feel like in dancing, you're using your body as a tool, right? It's sort of your medium of expression. It's your, instead of paint, you have your body. Instead of your voice, you have your body. So it's very much kind of a tool. And so in a way, you're very objectified by your own mind and also by others, right? And so I feel like the yoga is sort of a healing process for a lot of dancers, because all of a sudden they're integrating into their body more and like becoming a subject instead of an object. And I think it can be a really healing process to come into your body and to like feel what's going on in a really natural, organic way, rather than in the dance world, it's always with the mirrors. You're always looking at yourself. You're always judging yourself. It's very critical. It really trains that inner critic, that voice, nothing's good enough. Nothing looks great unless it's perfect. So it like kind of cultivates a lot of these more negative habits, mental habits. And I think the yoga, because more often than not, it's done in a space without mirrors, right? And it's like going inside and feeling from the inside, and then using the breath and like staying with the breath. And it's really like more integrating the mind-body connection, I think. And so there's an attraction to it because it's still physical, but I feel like it's much more healthy movement and kind of organic and a little bit more natural than the dance world.
Yeah, I agree. I've done some dancing as well. But well, I did yoga first, and then I came into dancing.
Yeah.
And to me, it was the opposite. Like when I came into a room full of mirrors and everyone was like fixated on the mirrors and looking at the shape and all of that, I was thinking to myself, this is madness. I was like, this is really madness. And then it took me some time to accommodate to that.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear your experience coming from it, like from the other side of like, whoa, what's
Yeah.
happening here?
Yeah. Totally. But I can see that difference, and also like this bit of competitiveness as well
Oh,
that
very much
exists. No,
so.
it's not bit, it's like big time competitiveness
Yeah.
in dancing, and then in yoga maybe it is still there, kind of like
Yeah.
underlaying, and you
Yeah,
try to,
totally.
silence it,
Yeah.
but it's different.
Yeah, and even like the the kind of the goal or the outcome of dancing is always like the performance, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're training to be a professional dancer, that's
Of
like
course.
that's what you're training for, is like to perform. Um, Whereas in yoga, I mean, there's no performance really, right? So it kind of,
Well, it can be some performance as well, but
for sure, but it's like it ultimately, like there's no performance, right? It eliminates that goal. I mean, we can make it a performance, but
mhm.
no one's gonna buy tickets to come watch your practice unless you like decide to like turn it into a performance, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
thing.
That's very true. That's very true. So you started in 95, and you were mentioning when we were offline that your first experience uh, was with Ashtanga yoga, but you
Yeah.
actually didn't know.
No, I didn't know at
Surprise.
all. Yeah, it was just like, this is yoga. This is my teacher had come back from a retreat somewhere, and this is what I learned. And she just taught like the sequence of asanas. And we were like, okay, great. This is what we do now. This is our new sequence. I mean, in dance, it's very normal to have like a sequence that you
Uh-huh.
would memorize and then just do all the time, right? So that's what we did.
So it
Yeah.
was easy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was easy. It wasn't, I mean, I was very flexible. I was very young. I was very
Mm.
strong. I mean, maybe not super strong, but we weren't doing even all of primary series. We did all of the standing postures, and then I think we did like a few seated postures, and then
Mm.
that was it. Then it was like,
Mm.
okay, we're warm. Let's move on.
Let's do the real thing now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you started, we were also talking now offline, that you started doing some more yoga, and
Mhm.
then sometime in the early 2000s, you decided this was going to be the thing.
Yeah, yeah. So after I took my first yoga class, then I was like really hooked and wanted to continue practicing, but I wasn't practicing every day because I was still a full-time student with a full course load and also a job working
Mm.
at the same time. So I was kind of, fitting in classes wherever I could that would fit my schedule. And then in my last 2 years of university, we had sort of a I had been introduced to Mysore in kind of a funny way. There was like one class on the schedule of this yoga studio that I was going to, and it was in the evening. It was at like 7 p.m. at night or something. And so I was like, oh, what's this Mysore class? You're just sampling all the different classes and trying to figure things out. So I went to this class, and I was the only one there.
Oh.
And so the owner of the school came out, and he basically gave me a private lesson. And I was like, is that what this class is? It's like a private lesson. He's like, well, if there's more people, you just kind of do your own practice, and yeah, you get, instruction for you. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Why are not more people coming to this class? So then I would like try to go to this Mysore class, but also they just give you like the sheet, the paper with
Oh.
the pastures.
And then you're like next to your mat.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
But then interesting thing was, um, it kind of gave me a lot of confidence that I could do it on my own, that I didn't need this class. And so then I started like, I had got David Swenson's book and his videos, and then I was just like practicing on my own, either at home before I'd go to school, or I would go to a lead class or something like that before, like if I had later classes in the day, things that it would work into my schedule. But then another studio opened that had a Mysore program, but the Mysore program was not taught. So it was basically open practice. And so someone would come in and open up the studio, and it was from, I think, like maybe 6 to 8 in the morning or something like that, or 7 to 9. And like 1 or 2 or 3 or sometimes like 6 of us would come in, and it was basically the same thing, right? It was like open practice. And so you come in, you'd practice the sequence, primary series basically. And then if you needed help, we would just like get up and adjust each other. And so then that's how I really like started developing a regular practice, was through this open practice group and space. And then it just grew from there.
Mm. And then at some point, Harmony, you showed up in Mysore, India, not only in the Mysore class, but in Mysore, India. I'm saying this because you're also a certified teacher, and that is visiting the institute in Mysore many times for many years.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So yeah, there was no Mysore program, like no taught Mysore program in my city. There was just this open practice, but there was like a kind of a group of us that were becoming more dedicated and like interested in really like learning Ashtanga yoga properly. And so we would go and sometimes visit other Mysore programs and do like a week vacation in Vancouver, or Edmonton at that time had a Mysore program. And that was really nice because we'd kind of get this infusion in our practice, like we were talking about at the beginning. But then we come home and be on our own again, just practicing in our little self-practice group. And I think one person went to Mysore and came back, Mysore, India. And then I was like, that's where I want to go. I really want to go to Mysore, India. But I had to wait until I'd finished all my classwork at university. So I finished my last final exam, and then I basically got on a plane and went to Mysore, and then just spent like 5 months there, my first trip, and came back. And then I was only back in Calgary for about 4 months, and then I moved to Thailand, and then I was teaching and living there and practicing and teaching Mysore program, and like dove in teaching teacher trainings, dove into the whole thing. And then it was really a process of going between Thailand and India back and forth. It's a lot shorter flight, also a lot cheaper flight than from Canada, which worked out really nicely. And yeah, I sort of entered this place inside myself where, the practice was really, the number one priority for me. It was, top of list. And it was nice because I lived at this retreat center, so I didn't have to cook or clean, or, I was kind of living retired life at 25. And no children. It's just like, this is life, right? Just like immersed in yoga and reading and studying and practicing and teaching and learning, and did that for 3 years. Which was, it was like a very immersive, intensive kind of experience.
Good for you. Yeah. Sounds like good life.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's nice to have that kind of control over your life and your schedule, and to also have like no real worries or concerns in some ways, We didn't have a car. We just like borrowed a scooter. We didn't have insurance. We didn't have a home, just living out of a suitcase. There's something that's very nice about that, about not having roots and attachments. And it really allows you to deepen your spiritual practice in many ways. But then there's also something about putting down the roots and having the car and the home and the insurance and the healthcare and the, children and the all of the responsibilities and the miser program or whatever, right? That you're in charge of, that really forces you to almost dig in deeper into an inquiry about what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience, what it means to practice spirituality and yoga, because it's sort of that old metaphor, right? It's easy to, be super peaceful and at one with yourself when you're in a cave and no one's bothering you. Right. You're like, I'm the most spiritually perfect person on the planet. But as soon as you leave your little cave and you encounter your first relationship or interaction with someone, right? It's the test. It's like, oh, let's see how your practice is actually working for you. Let's see how it's serving you. And so there's something about, I think, not being completely selfish and self-absorbed in your spiritual pursuits, that living in the real world, in the world that requires us to be of service and to put ourself not first, but, to realize there is no self actually. Right. And so how can you put yourself first if there is no self? That makes you bring your spiritual experience, or makes you bring this practice into everyday moments in everyday life, and requires a great deal of trust and surrender, right? You can't rely on your own capabilities and capacities, because there's too much to do. There's too many people. There's too many relationships. There's so much to manage, right? So you have to, in some ways, like, release those attachments. And for me, that's always the real yoga. The real yoga isn't about creating this perfect structure to your life so that you can maintain the system. It's really about, disrupting that and then seeing what you're made of and seeing if you can maintain the balance of your mind when everything's in chaos.
I'm smiling because do you know this book by Jack Kornfield? It's called "A Path with Heart." Does it ring a bell?
I've heard of it. Yes.
You've
and I
heard of
know
it?
some of Jack Kornfield's writing. Yeah.
That's a great book. I'll bring it to you when you come to Madrid. I have it in the shala.
I love that.
I have it in English.
Ooh, excellent. Even better.
So you can actually understand. So this book, I was laughing because I remember the very first 2 pages of the book. The introduction is like, Jack says that he was in Southeast Asia, I think. That's where he spent years in a monastery doing like Buddhist meditation and all this, the spiritual disciplines, very structured and very orchestrated. And then he showed up in his hometown, which was, if I remember correctly, New York. And he came with this halo of nearly like an enlightened man. I've changed. I've done all these practices for this, I don't know, 10 years. So, and then just to realize that he was still triggered by the same things that he used to be triggered
right
10 years before. And that gave him a lot to think about. And so what he did, he moved back to New York.
Yeah.
He took on a job as a cab driver. He got involved with a woman, even in a romantic relationship. And he said, okay, now the real work starts.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, this is what I've been doing in Asia for this 10 years has been like something that I had to do, and that prepared me for this. This is like
the
real deal.
Yeah. And I think I feel like there's a lot of benefit to having that time, like a little protected sanctuary where you get to go deep and you get to make it be all about you and your practice and your spiritual development and your pranayama and your meditation and your right? Like there's something really beautiful about having that time, because most people on the planet don't have that time. And so it's both a privilege and a place of deep growth and deep sort of letting the roots go deep and letting yourself really be nurtured by those practices and that process. But I think that part too is really important, right? that if it only stays in that space, then you kind of miss the fruits of that period, right? It's like the tree doesn't grow. And so you almost have to come out and enter those challenging, spaces in order to be of service, in order to allow the fruits of that time to make that time that was a privilege, that was part of your path and part of your journey actually mean something. Otherwise, what does it mean? It's sort of useless, right?
It's a little bit like, I used to call it the yoga bubble. When you're in Mysore, for example, and then you start jumping from one country to the other. And then you get, in a way, it might seem liberating for some time, but then I've seen people, friends, because I've never actually been in that bubble for a long time, but maybe I will. In my 40s, who knows? Surprise. But I know people that have got stuck in like the traveling, and it's just interesting as well. It's interesting as well. You touched on something that I would like you to elaborate a little more on, which is self-absorption. Because it's somewhat paradoxical that we are doing this practice to realize that there is no sense of I, or in a way to dissolve the sense of I, or like a deeply rooted sense of I coming from ideas, mind stuff, all these things. But then we become really self-centered. Like my practice, what I eat, at what time I go to bed, don't talk to me at this time. Like we can become very particular. Very particular. So tell us about that.
Okay. Sure, let's talk about it. I mean, again, it's always like both. It's always an and. But finding the balance between those two things, I think is really that's the yoga, right? I mean, and I always like to think yoga, we always talk about the definition being like union, to join, to bring together, right? We're trying to transcend the opposites, right? So in a way, there's a disjoining, right? A non-attachment that's happening, or a recognizing that like none of this is really lasting or permanent or that important. So there's like that experience you were talking about of coming back home into your city and feeling like, wow, I'm not really connected here in the same way I used to be. these things, these people, these places don't matter that much to me as they used to. But also there's a joining where you know, we're letting go, yes, but we're also we also have to take on. We have to do the two at the same time, right? So to be in the world and not of the world, or to be of service, but not attached to the results of your your actions. You know, and Krishna talks a lot about this in the Gita. And yeah, I think in a way, the practice, especially the rules, the systems that we kind of put in place, like I need to go to bed at 8 o'clock, you know, I mean, some of them are just for health purposes, maybe, right? If you're going to get up at 3 a.m, you should probably go to bed at 8 p.m. That's like kind of your minimum. Right? There's definitely certain kinds of food that are going to feel better in your body, that are going to you're going to digest more easily, that are going to create a sense of lightness and a sense of clarity in your mind and your body. You know, all these things are real, like they're real things, and important to our practice, whether it's an asana practice or a meditation practice. But when we get attached to these things, it becomes an obstacle, right? It becomes now we're the things, you know, it's sort of that idea that the process is to lead us to the experience. But we get so attached to the process that we're missing the experience. And so then, in a way, we have to also be flexible with those things and realize that even though these things can support the experience, it can support our practice, it can support how we're feeling, it can support our sense of connection and clarity, that actually that connection and clarity is always there, right? We can't lose it. It's never something we need to create. It's always present. It's always there. And you know, we can eliminate some things that might make us feel foggy or heavy or disconnected, right? And that can help us connect, feel that experience more easily. But I think once you know how to find that experience, once you know that it's always there, you realize it actually doesn't matter so much. You know, the time you go to bed, the time you get up, the amount of asanas you do, the amount of time you meditate, the you know, food you're eating, you realize, oh, it's always there. It's not going anywhere. It's not going away. But our minds are very tricky. And I think certain things that we do or don't do can put us into sort of not seeing clearly. And I think that's the whole point of yoga, is to see our experience clearly and see ourselves clearly and see each other clearly. And when we can see clearly, then we understand that it's just the way it's meant to be. And we're not fighting reality, and we're not fighting ourselves and resisting. But, you know, the mind is it likes to be negative, it likes to be critical, it likes to parse things into specific, you know, labels and categories and create division rather than a unified experience. And so when the mind starts to get more and more active or strong or involved, then we can sometimes kind of forget, you know, we get sucked into that negative feeling or that division, or, you know, and then those thoughts then create the emotions, you know, and then we're feeling bad and we're feeling sad and we're feeling angry and we're upset. And then it's you know, and then that creates maybe, you know, outcomes in our life that aren't so great because we're cycling in this sort of negative space.
Yeah.
But the positive space is always there. The positive, I mean, I'm going to say positive, but it's not really positive or negative. It just is, right? We can connect to that clarity at any moment. We can have a different thought at any moment. We can believe a different thing at any moment. and it's true, it's not just like making something up. We can, find the evidence for it also in our lives. So we kind of need both, I think. We need some structure and some discipline for sure, so that we don't get lost in the chaos, so that we don't get pulled under by whether it's our minds or us feelings, or being just sucked into the drama of life. So we need to do something to continue to see clearly, but sometimes we get too attached to all those things, and then we think those things are the things that are actually important, when really they're not. They're like the boat that's taking us to the other shore. And I think that's where that metaphor always comes in, that once you get to the other side of the shore, you don't keep carrying the boat with you. Right? You leave the boat and you go on your way. So.
Along the lines of what you're talking about, a couple of things came to mind. The first one is the way we change and how we are transformed as we enter this practice. And this is my personal view, which is personal and subjective. But the way I've seen it in myself, and I see it in other people, we can become very militant and very strict and very rigid about all these rules, because there are, for example, in the Ashtanga world, there are so many rules that if you want rules, you're gonna have them. You're gonna get them. Don't worry. There's no end to how many rules there are. You're gonna be fun. You're gonna be entertained, definitely. But at some point, you open your eyes a little more, and you realize that nothing has really changed. I mean, the changes that you think you have experienced have been superficial, happened in the surface, which is the first level of change that probably had to happen. But then as you go deeper, inquiring deeper into yourself, you realize that you are still subscribing to the same schemes of thought, emotional ways of existing, if you like, as well as before. You're just changing the outside. You're just changing one thing for the other. But there's this guy, have you heard of JP Sears?
Yeah,
he has. Have you seen this video he has, how to be ultra spiritual?
Oh, no? Yeah. Yes, I think so. I think I have. Yeah, he's so funny.
So he talks about this, like, you, for example, as a Catholic, you subscribe to that Catholic dogma, and then you become more new agey, and then you're subscribed to the same dogma, but you're using different terms. Yeah. So many times, I think we fall into that trap of thinking that we've changed, but actually everything remains the same. And I believe we can stay there for a long time, for like a really long time. And that's when we create separation. Is that when we start labeling people, I'm right, you're wrong, and judging, I'm pointing fingers and all of that, and I'm teaching the right thing, I'm practicing the right thing, and you're doing wrong, and like, no, this kind of like silly fights. So that's one thing that came to mind. And then the other, which I'm actually, this second one, I mean, you can talk about anything you like, but this second one, this is what I'm really curious about. I remember Sharaji used to say, like, he has said this in a few conferences, like, yoga doesn't need you. You need yoga. Yeah. We need yoga, but I think that yoga needs us too, because like without practitioner, there's no practice.
That's true.
I mean, we bring it to life. We bring the practice to life. And so many times, I can only speak about Ashtanga because that's what I'm familiar with. But many times, your practice becomes longer, and you do more stuff, more and more and more. And then you have like a cut in your practice, and then it's super intense, and then longer. But then you also have a life to live. And especially when you're switching series from first to intermediate, from intermediate to third, I think those are breaking points. Those are critical points in your journey. So I'm curious to know, as you're so experienced and you've done a lot of stuff, what's your take on that?
Yeah. There's so much there. There's so much in there. I think let me start with the idea that and again, John Kabat-Zinn has that beautiful book, wherever you go, there you are.
Okay.
which I love the title. I love everything that he's pointing to in that book, that and it's exactly what you were saying, that we have deep patterns, deep samskaras, deep habits of thought. And then a lot of them are unconscious also, right? And that we bring those, we do a spiritual practice, and it cleans up maybe initially some of our critical voices, or some of our thinking, or some of our negative, thinking, or negative beliefs, or limiting beliefs. We start to get strong and flexible, and we think, I can do it. I'm amazing, right? Which maybe is just like the ego showing up in another form, right? New form, like, oh, I'm so spiritual, or I'm so strong, or I can stand on my hands, or I can do a back bend, or, it's all very gratifying for our small self, which, the whole point is to kind of recognize that none of this is permanent. None of it means anything about you. But at the beginning, we kind of feel like, it means a lot about me. And then, as you say, you can stay in that space for a long time, right? You can stay in that, we could say self-absorbed, or self sort of, I don't know, that ego space maybe. And I'm not saying this in a judgmental way or a negative way. It's just, we identify with our abilities. We identify with our diet. We identify with our lifestyle. And we take it on as, this is me now. I'm an Ashtangi, right? I practice Ashtanga yoga. I'm an Ashtanga yoga practitioner. And this becomes our new identity. And so the thing is there's deeper patterns. There's deeper things going on, like the pattern of, I'm not good enough. Right? And that was playing out before. It was playing out before you started yoga, in all kinds of different ways, with all kinds of different grasping at things, right? And now you enter your yoga practice, and it's still there. It's just a little quieter, maybe. And it comes out in different ways, right? Because you keep doing physical feats or different things that make you feel like, oh, finally, I'm good enough. But there's always another thing. And then what happens when you can't do the practice? When you can't do that back bend anymore, or you can't do that handstand anymore, or you get sick, or you lose a limb, or all kinds of things can happen, right? It's life. Sure. There's that pattern. It's still there. The yoga didn't take it out of you. You just you were identifying with different things that were making you feel good, right? That maybe were longer lasting because you were doing them every day. And so in a way, it's like if you take the medicine, it makes you feel better. But what happens if you stop taking it? Right? And I feel like the asana practice is a little dangerous this way.
Yeah.
Because we get addicted to it. And yes, you can argue it's a good addiction. It's a healthy addiction. It's helping you. And for sure, I'm not, if you're going to choose between heroin and asana, go for the asana, right?
An interesting comparison, though.
But we're still, but it's still, in a way, covering up some of these deeper patterns that are playing out, and I think it's really important to get to those patterns. And I think if you stay with it long enough, the practice isn't going to get you there, but life's going to get you there because something's going to happen, right? Whether it's sickness or, pregnancy or old age or lack of enthusiasm or, hormones or who knows, right? Like anything can kind of take you out of your comfort zone, because now you've created this beautiful yoga bubble, as you say, which is this nice comfort zone where everything fits perfectly and you don't have to deal with that ugly pattern that's underneath it all. Right? But as soon as you get pushed out of the bubble, the pattern's still there. And then you enter like the guilt cycle, the shame cycle, the what am I if I can't have my back bend? Who am I if I can't, do 3 hours of yoga every day? Right?
Because you can definitely do 3 hours of yoga. No problem.
Yeah, easily.
Easily, yeah.
So, yeah, in a way, it's like putting a Band-Aid over the deeper problem, the deep-rooted samskara, the wound that's even deeper. And I think unless you start to address that wound, unless you start to go to the core beliefs and the core wounds and the core sort of hurts and traumas and look at them, right? Then you're not really gonna be free from them. And the asana is really good for somatic release, for sure. I think you can release a lot of things through asana, a lot of stored emotion, a lot of, stored trauma and stress. You can just it's so good somatically. And it really teaches you to be with your uncomfortable feelings and with maybe sad sensations or painful sensations or uncomfortable sensations. And I think that's where it is a beautiful tool and can be really transformative. Because before the asana, maybe you're just running, right? Maybe you're running away from sensation, which a lot of people get stuck doing, right? But the asana helps you to be with the sensation. And that's kind of the key for also going deeper. But you have to consciously go deeper and consciously feel those deeper feelings, which are very uncomfortable and very deep rooted, in order to really bring them to the surface and pull them out. And so I think doing some deeper work outside of the asana is really helpful for spiritual development ultimately and spiritual advancement or spiritual growth. Because we can just get stuck with our tool, whether it's the meditation or the pranayama or the asana or, the journaling or whatever it is, we need to go deeper into some of the stuff that's not necessarily comfortable to look at.
And that's actually the nature of the work. That's the real work, because it's so true that we can get stuck in in asana or asana is a big one. I think there's a huge obsession around asana. I'm guilty of that. And I think Ashtangas in general, for people who are drawn to Ashtanga yoga, we have many virtues, but there's always it's always a double-edged sword, in the sense that you do have some level of ambition to do this asana, and then you find them fun, and then you get somewhat more comfortable doing them, and then you do more and more, and so that ambition is kind of fed in a way. But at some point you can get stuck. I'm not saying that it's bad to have that kind of ambition, but at some point you can get really stuck. And that's when the work starts. And some people sometimes get the feeling that feel a little lost. How do I handle myself?
Yeah, it
How
is
do I do this
interesting.
next
Yeah.
layer? Yeah, because there's no
Yeah.
guidance. I think there's not that much.
No. No. Yeah, and I think that was, I mean, that was kind of what led me to move more into like doing some deep work through coaching and like looking at
Mm-hmm.
some of these deeper layers of ourselves, because it is like being stuck in a way. It's you get stuck in this asana or this system, this routine that, as you say, is like can take you to a certain level, can take you to a certain depth, but then you're just like doing the thing, and you're also afraid to stop doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so now you're in this like really interesting place of like being obsessed with wanting more and like wanting to get better at something, but all and being afraid to stop doing it, because what happens if I lose all these physical abilities? Where is that fear coming from?
Yeah.
What happens if you lose all those physical
Mm.
abilities?
Mm. Mm.
I mean, if like you talk to an actual Ashtanga yoga practitioner, right? That's like that creates anxiety. Right? It's really scary. It's really scary because we're attached to it. We're so identified with it. But I work so hard at Kapotasana. I can't lose it. What if I lose it? Right?
2 days and it's gone.
Yeah, and now you're trapped. Now you're trapped. Now you're in this cycle of addiction, right? Because of the fear is driving you. And how do you make it stop? How do you get off that wheel, as you're saying? How do you get off the wheel and go deeper? We have to actually face those fears. And then we have to like re-engage the practice in a way that makes sense for us. Rather than doing it just the way we've been told. And again, like when you're learning a system or learning a practice, you need some kind of system. You need a method. You need you need those rules. You need those structures in order to learn something, right? It's just like if you're learning how to play an instrument, you need to understand the notes. Otherwise, you're not going to learn to play, right? You need to learn maybe how to read music so you know where to play those notes so that it sounds good, because that's part of the learning process. You need a system, a method, and a structure. But at some point, you need to also then look at the system, the method, and the structure and figure out if it's actually working for you still. Right? And then go deeper and figure out, how can I make this work for me? And what is, where is it limiting my growth? Where is it helping my growth? Where am I getting stuck or attached or embedded? And, where is it helping me get free? Is it still helping me get free? And like face some of those deeper fears, right? Because we can talk about it. We can talk about like, oh, the asana means nothing. Like Kapotasana doesn't make you a better person. You hear people say things like this all the time, right? Karandavasana doesn't make you a better person. More advanced yogas doesn't mean a more advanced yogi. You can say that all you want, but the experience of it is terrifying.
I know. Yeah.
Right? And so we're giving lip service to it, but deep down, we're very much attached to these abilities, to our bodies, to our able-bodiedness, to our status on Instagram, or our status in like the Ashtanga community, right? As an advanced asana practitioner. And so then the real work is like actually unraveling that attachment, unraveling that fear. Like what comes up for you if you're not doing Karandavasana, right? What like, where's the origin of that anxiety? Where's the origin of that motivation to keep doing it? And if it's like trying to prove, oh, I'm good enough, then you're kind of missing the whole point of the practice, because you never have to prove that. You already are good enough. And so is the person who never does an asana in their entire life.
There's something about it was actually in my mind before you mentioned that, but I thought that we will get to this point in this conversation, which is the system. You were comparing it to learning to play an instrument. You need some codes, you need notes, you need to know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You need to have gone through the practice, through the system for a few years consistently. I think the Bhagavad Gita says 10 years is yoga apprenticeship. After the first decade, the real yoga starts. I think you start to see through all this BS in a way. Like you get more clear, or you might not get more clear. It depends on maybe your path or your karma. But
Yeah.
usually after the first 10 years, something happens. Something starts to really shift at the very core. And I think that a lot of the yoga drama comes from not knowing how to handle this very natural transformation, which is this system has been supporting you, and it's been uplifting you, elevating you, inspiring you. You've also gone through downs and all of that. But at some point, we need to ask ourselves a very important question, which is this serving me? Is it really truly serving me? Because the trap is to just practice out of willpower.
Yeah.
And out of discipline. I think you can sustain that type of practice for a few years. It depends on how stubborn you are.
Yes, exactly.
But there is a limit to everything, even to your stubbornness. At some point, you have to really cultivate that deeper connection with what you're doing, like finding your own reasons to do it. And usually you find them when you can see the practice as a vehicle that can help you grow and develop. And rigidity, when it comes to the system, this after this after this, and all these rules and regulations, inevitably they are going to hinder the natural expansion that your soul wants. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think this is a very natural point that long-term practitioners reach, but we are not supported in this quest at all. So what do you think about this? Or how have you handled that? Because I've seen, we were saying that you've been going to Mysore for many years, you've been in the yoga bubble, you've been in life, like rooted in one place and having responsibilities, and your the words that you use, for instance, on your Instagram account now are, like Instagram is how we express ourselves, and it's a vehicle. That's it. You talk about soul searching, you talk about going deep, you talk about work-life balance, you talk about self-care big time. So there's a change there. There's been a shift.
Yeah. I don't really know when. Maybe it was COVID. Maybe it was like during COVID times. I don't know.
What happened during COVID? Everything was disrupted.
Yeah, everything was disrupted, exactly. And I don't know, I think I really started to see and question whether the practice was really nurturing or not. And For me at that time, it was not possible to do that kind of rigid, structured practice, that kind of routine every single day. I mean, I started off pretty strong, but slowly it kind of shifted and it became more about like, what do I need today? And asking those questions and trying to really listen. Like, what do I need today? Like, do I need primary series? Is that what I need? And like listening. And I know Ashtanga yoga practitioners, many, many of them aren't going to like this because, there's dangers in a way. I mean, I don't even think they're dangers, to be honest, but we see them as dangers because then it's like, well, then you get lazy, then you're not doing your practice, and then you lose your practice. But again, that's the fear. So is the practice there to serve you, or are you there to serve the practice?
Yeah.
Right? And it kind of comes down to that phrase that we were talking about, like, you need the yoga doesn't need you. Right? Okay. But is the practice here to serve us so that we can live more full, expansive, enriched lives, feel more connected, feel more grounded, feel more centered, have a more regulated nervous system? Or are we here to uphold a system and a practice?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important question to ask yourself. And sometimes taking care of yourself or doing, having self-care, like using the practice for self-care, I think is very different than seeing the practice as a tool for like your purification, or seeing the practice as a tool for your discipline, or using the practice as a tool for your, to challenge yourself every day or something, right? Like there's a different kind of like idea going into it that brings different results. And there's been times in my life where I've used the practice like as a tool for purification. That's been the goal. I want to purify my body. I want to purify my nervous system. But at other times in life, the practice needs to be about self-care. It needs to be about nurturing, right? And so what we're choosing to do in our practice, again, like you don't need to push those edges all the time. You don't need to like push to the maximum. And again, it comes back to that patterning, right? Like, we're kind of programmed to be doing. We're programmed to be achieving. We're programmed to be always pushing to our maximum, right? What happens if we stop? What happens if we rest? There's kind of a movement, rest as revolution. And I love it because I think it's so important. So if the practice, then the Ashtanga yoga practice, if it just becomes again another system that's reinforcing this deeper rooted pattern in us that's about doing and achieving and being our best and staying disciplined and being on course and like all of those things, it's just like reinforcing that patterning, right? And so we're bringing that into our life, and for a while it's okay. You can achieve a lot and you can do a lot and you can like but at some point, as you say, if you're practicing for a long period of time, you're like, can I stop now?
Can I be myself?
Right? Like, yeah, can I, like, and who am I without all of this like pushing and doing and achieving and succeeding? Like, do I have value? Like, am I worth something? And so then going into that deeper place of like
True.
Like I'm trying to prove that I'm worthy through this. Whoa. that's kind of like underneath a lot of it, right?
Mm.
And so then like going to that place, then the way you approach the practice is very different. If you are already worthy, if you don't have to prove that you're worthy, and you really like know that you're valuable and you're worthy just as you are, without doing any asana, without doing any kapotasana or kranavasana or a forward fold or a backwards fold, if you really know that, like in your essence, and you're coming from that place, what do you choose to do? And so that's been kind of the work that I've been doing the last few years, is trying to get exactly underneath these patterns and trying to see or like dismantle some of just the indoctrination of like, you have to do this, you know, you're not doing your spiritual practice if you're not doing an hour and a half of asana, or, you know, because there's no end to it, right? It's just like
There's no end.
there's no end. I mean, and then you're going to want to do the pranayama, and then you're going to want to do the meditation. And I've been there. I've done the 4 hours of like spiritual discipline every day for years. To what end, right? To only have this massive weight that I need to do every day in order to feel worthy, in order to feel complete, in order to feel whole. But that's available. That's there all the time. It's just like this block that we have of connecting to. And it's, again, that deep patterning that, you know, is from childhood. It's from a long time back, where we're feeling like we need to prove our value or our worthiness or our, you know, get our parents' love or whatever the pattern is, you know, it could be a little different for everyone. And addressing that. And then if you decide to do primary series from that place, you practice in a very different way also, right? So, or intermediate series or whatever series, rather than it being like a master to you, or like feeling like, you know, you have to show up in a certain way or do things perfectly or, you know, correct method. It becomes more about like you in the practice and like connecting to you, because you're already valuable. You're already doing it correctly. You don't have to strive to get anywhere.
Actually, that's one of the reasons why I am excited that you're coming. Is that there are many people that are very knowledgeable in asana, and that's a merit, and that's fantastic. I mean, when you can learn asana from someone who knows the stuff, it's like mind-blowing. But then this deeper layer of work is also very important. And I do believe that we, as individuals, we need to see ourselves, to find ourselves in the practice. We need, whether we are willing to recognize it or not, it's some yearning within that wants to see the self in the practice. And that's when the real connection starts. And it doesn't come from your discipline. It doesn't come from subscribing to a system. It doesn't come from willpower. All those things you can uphold for a few years, again, based on how stubborn you are, but it's not going to be the practice that you're going to be keeping for a lifetime. There is an end to it. And that's why I'm excited that you're coming. And many times I think, Harmony, that we need to reconsider what advancing in yoga really means. Well, first, what being an advanced yoga practitioner means. You know, there are many dancers, for example, that have been working with their bodies since they were 5. And so the physicality is there already. They just need to kind of work in a few things. And so you can be really proficient in movement, not doing yoga. I'm not going to call it circus or anything, because there is some there is a lot of beauty in that as well, and there is a lot of work, and there's a lot of merit, but then this layer of work, you might be doing all this fancy stuff and never get to this, never ever. And so I think this is something that long-term practitioners really need. Really, really need. We need it.
Totally.
And so I'm glad that you're coming.
I'm really glad too. And I completely agree. I mean, I think the whole reason why, yoga, I think that initial experience of, having the shavasana at the end of the practice or the rest and like waking up and feeling, I mean, connecting to essence, let's say, or connecting to, you can call it spirit or essence or whatever that is, that space inside yourself where you feel whole and complete and resourced and like integrated. And it's blissful, right? It's maybe that Anandamaya kosha that we talk about, that body of bliss, because it's pure and it's true, but it's always there. But that first experience, that like gateway drug that we have is like, you connect to it after the practice. And it's so good. And it is like exactly what you're talking about, this essence, this like self beyond, our attachments and beyond our achievements and beyond all the doing. But then because we had this experience from the asana practice, at least in my case, then you're like, I need to do the asana again to get this experience. Right?
For 4 hours.
Yeah. And then it keeps going, right? Because you're just like chasing this experience. And I mean, I can connect to that experience in like, if I go into a Vipassana meditation retreat and I have like 10 days of silence and 8 hours of meditating a day. Whew, it's so beautiful, right? You're just like, oh, this is so perfect. No one's talking to me. No one's emailing me. I mean, they are, but I'm not involved. I don't have my phone. I don't have anything. I just have this like just unlayering, right? Unlayering to connect to essence. But then, as you say, we kind of get caught in the cycle or in that pattern or in that attachment to the tools, to the asana, to the meditation, to the and then the ego, because it's so tricky and so slippery and with us all the time. Starts to take over. And then it's like, oh, but if you can only do this, we get dopamine hits too. You do a nice kapotasana, boom. It's like playing Candy Crush or whatever, video game people like to play these days. You get the dopamine hit, like, oh, I did it, I'm good. Oh, I did it, I'm good. Right. And so we're getting like these little gold stars along the way. And then we forget that the whole reason why we started doing the practice was because we had that initial connection to essence, to feeling completely whole and complete and like integrated. And then we're only having that experience now when we're getting those gold stars, or when we're doing like all of the practices for all of the time, or whatever that looks like, right? However, we've defined what it means to do a practice. And we forget that actually that presence, that bliss body, that Anandamaya kosha, that experience of being whole and integrated and loving, and love itself is the goal. It's to understand that it's always there and we can always feel it and always connect to it. But not just like in our language, right? Not just with the words, but actually experiencing it, and that you can connect to it. You can use anything as this tool, right? As soon as you start to bring presence and awareness into anything you're doing, washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, taking the garbage out, having a conversation with someone, like it's available all the time. And that's actually the real practice of yoga, is how we're focusing our attention and our mind and our presence and our awareness in every situation. And then when you start doing that, then you're like, oh, well, why am I doing so much asana? Like, I can do this all day long. I actually don't need to practice asana for 3 hours to do this. It's just something I can do now because I've trained my mind or my ability to be in the moment, you know? So then it becomes that funny balance and that funny dance between like, what's enough? What isn't enough? You know, what's too much? Can I be happy if I don't get to do the thing that I wanted to do? Right. Like balancing that kind of, you know, that kind of like maintaining a connection to something that allows you to be present. But it doesn't have to be asana ultimately. You know, there's very many enlightened teachers and spiritual practitioners that don't practice asana. Maybe they practice some other form of yoga, you know, whether it's meditation or pranayama or chanting or, you know, like all of these tools are just tools. And the fact that as like an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, we're like obsessed with asana and like prioritize it above everything else. I mean, that's just our choice. That's it doesn't make it a better choice or a more effective tool, right?
I think there is something that the Yoga Sutras say that in the first pada, Samadhi pada, it gives different examples of how you can reach that experience of the divine.
Yes.
And it goes like, you can do this or this or this, like different disciplines, different like discipline based, hard work based. You can sweat for it, or you can just surrender.
Yes. Yeah.
But sometimes I think that I personally don't consider myself very evolved because I need to exhaust myself, or I've been exhausting myself for many years just to get to this point. It's like, I had to do the hard. I'm doing the hard work, and I've definitely done it. I keep doing it, and I get thinking like, how can I just surrender? How can I just like, you know?
Yeah.
Take it easy, but it doesn't come naturally to me. It's like, it gives us something to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, also, this is the beautiful paradox about every like spiritual path and spiritual practice is we feel like, again, like, oh, I would be a better practitioner if I could just surrender. Right. So then it becomes like good. It becomes like this better, worse, good, bad. Right. And again, it's not like either or in a way, right? It's just like also like surrendering is also just being in a state of full acceptance with what is. And so like, I'm obsessed with my asana practice. Okay, I'm just going to accept this. I'm obsessed with asana right now. And I'm just going to allow myself.
I own my obsession.
Right? That's part of it, right? That's part of the surrender. That's part of the practice. Instead of saying, I'm so obsessed with asana, I wish I wasn't, or I wish I could just surrender. It's like, no, the surrender is actually just being okay with being obsessed with asana. It's like such a like oxymoron. It's so, I mean, maybe not an oxymoron, but it's just like, it's just a paradox. It's just a paradox, right? And we're always used to placing this thing outside of ourselves. Like, oh, I'll just be happy if this, or I'll just be spiritual if this, or I'll just be complete if this. And the truth is, we're already whole and complete. We're already spiritual. We're already perfect. Right? And so it's like turning it inside out. That's kind of what we have to do to ourselves. Not just upside down, but inside out.
Upside down, inside out. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
You've definitely given us some food for thought. So I appreciate that. And
it's been such a wonderful conversation. I'm so excited to come and teach and be with you in person.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm really excited. And I was telling you, like I've said it different times, several times, that this level of work, it's very necessary, and not many people are engaged in it.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I don't mean it as a bad thing. I just think
Yeah.
we can be ignorant in many ways, and getting stuck
Yeah.
in the way things are is a way
Yeah.
to be ignorant, because the way things are that way because we make them that way.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know, it's like you make it that way in your mind, and so it's your reality, because you
Yeah.
cannot look beyond. But if you don't see someone that is doing things differently,
Yeah.
sometimes all you need is just seeing that, oh, there's a different way to do stuff. And
Yeah.
also going through all the fear, all
Yeah.
the, like, it's like losing
Yeah.
your identity.
It is. It is.
Losing your
Yeah.
identity, and what do I do now? You know?
Yeah. And it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy
Uh,
work to do this deeper
yeah.
unlayering and
Uh-huh.
and r- realization of yourself.
Mm.
It I mean, in a way it's kind of easy to talk about it, but the actual experience of it is like quite literally terrifying. Yeah. So
Somebody save me.
yeah, so it's
Mm.
not, and it's not something, I mean, I love Mysore, and practicing there, I think, can really, you can go deep into a lot of
Mm.
things. But this kind of work, it's it's not being taught in Mysore, India. This kind of
No,
like
it's
um
your work. It's your work
yeah,
individually.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so,
Yeah.
but you can also have people who can help you. Do you know what I mean? Like you almost need someone who can
Mm-hmm.
help you, because it's a lot. It's a lot to have this
Mm-hmm.
come up, and it is your work, but you also need like a support and a guide. And it's not about the physical asana, and it's not about like just getting up an hour earlier, and it's not about what you ate for lunch or didn't eat for lunch, right? Like it's actually about sitting and being with very deep stuff inside of yourself and being
Mm-hmm.
okay with it
Mm-hmm.
and just allowing it and feeling
Mm-hmm.
it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, as uncomfortable as Marichiasana D is or Kapotasana is in your body, this is that somatic feeling without the
Uh-huh.
asana. It's like the inner asana,
Mm-hmm.
and and allowing yourself to go there,
Mm.
and then facing that fear and realizing that it's okay, right? That you're not dead and that
Mm.
nothing bad happened. You just were able to feel it and be
Mm.
with it. And then it changes, and then you can be
Uh,
free from it.
yeah, I actually think that after listening to this chat, some people are going to be confused. And yeah, some people are going to be confused, and I welcome that. Because some people sometimes, when we do interviews, they come up to me and say, but what do you mean that we shouldn't be doing this, or we shouldn't be practicing this way, or that's not what
Yeah.
I mean. But just the
Yeah.
fact that you're questioning,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, the questioning is so good.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the questioning brings the freedom. It brings the answers eventually, but it's like question everything. Question
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, and question it many times even. Like, I want to do the asana practice. Why?
Mm.
Well, I want to feel good in my body. Why?
Mm.
Like keep going, keep on layering. Ask yourself why 7 times. I
Like
want to do
kids.
Kapotasana. Why? Well, I want to achieve something. But why? Well, I want to feel good about myself. Why? Right? Now we're starting to get to the
Mm-hmm.
real thing. Well, because I don't feel like I'm enough, or I don't feel like I'm successful, or I don't feel, well, why? Right?
Yeah.
Now we're going deeper.
Like, you know, when you're with a kid and they start like, why? At some point you do that, just because.
Just because.
Because you want to cut it. You're going to cut it. But actually kids, they are on point.
They are on point.
They are on point when they're like, but why? And you're interested in coaching. So this is, I suppose this is part of the work that you do. You do why until you get to the root, or at least closer to the root. And it's then you realize that it's not about asana, it's not about kapotasana, it's not about lineage, it's not about anything. It's about usually this sense of lack.
Yeah, exactly.
When you lack something.
Yes,
100%. And you try to compensate. You try to compensate in any way you can. But it's like this deep sense of lack and emptiness and not belonging, and which we all have for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's the human experience. And we don't want to feel those things. And so exactly what you're saying is we're trying to compensate with all these other things. You know, oh, I want to do it correctly. Well, why? Or even what's correctly, right? Well, it's what Sharat says. Why is that correct? Well, it's the Ashtanga yoga lineage. Why is that the right lineage? Well, it's the one I'm like committed to. Well, why is that the one you're committed to? Well, it's the one I first learned. Why, right? And you can just keep going. Eventually it's like, I want to belong. I want to be included. I want to be a part of something. Okay. And you can get to those deeper reasons, and some of them are really valid and true. And some of them are exactly what you're saying, is like coming from this sense of not belonging, or feeling like you're not a part of something bigger, or like you don't have self, like you're not worthy, or you're not enough, or all those deeper things. And then in a way it frees you. You can do kapotasana or not, right? You can choose to or not, once you kind of feel the feeling that's underneath everything.
Oh, I'm very excited that you're coming, Harmony. That's so cool. Yay.
Yeah, I'm really grateful. And this has been such a enriching conversation. It's been really wonderful. So thank you for having me on your podcast. I hope it's enjoyable for people to listen to.
Yeah, of course. Now people are going to be like,
what?
I gotta listen again. 1 hour 40 minutes again. That's good. Okay. Thank you so much, Harmony.
Thank you, Carmen.
Sending you love from Madrid, Spain, to Calgary, Canada. We'll see you in September.
See you in September.
Thank you so much, Harmony. That was fun.
Thank you. It was so good.
Yeah.
I'd love to release it after you release it too. I'll send you the thing from our conversation too, and then we can do like a little flip.
Okay, that's perfect. What we will take a clip from it and share it. So the full thing is on your YouTube or wherever you put it. And then I'll share this. We will share this with you as well.
Okay.
And you can do as you please. And I'm gonna see if because I'm on this freaking iPad, sorry, and I don't know how to stop the recording. And Miguel is gone. Okay, so feel free to just leave them.
Just leave, and it'll stop on its own. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I would like to stop. Okay,